Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Unattached Drifter Christmas. That's right, it's Valentine's Day here on the Supernatural Track, and we're going to talk about Winchester romances, hookups, and one-night stands. But before we get into that, let's go around and have the panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Alexander.
Hey guys, I'm Alexander Gideon, and my writing style can best be summed up with the phrase, and many people died. My first book, through Falstaff Books, Web of Crimson, is available now. You can find it on Amazon or Kindle Unlimited if you have that right now. And there's few people that have ever existed that had relationships the way that Aleister Crowley did, and that's the main character of the series.
Who, of course, has his namesakes well represented in Supernatural.
Exactly.
How about you, Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I'm a former journalist and now writer and editor, and I fell down the rabbit hole of Supernatural. I came late to the party, but got very enthused. So that's me.
Sounds good. How about you, Carole?
I'm Carole Stokes. I've been in the fandom. I started in season 3. And in 2012, I started writing, and I have fanfic up under Fire Sign 10. And just a devoted fan, devoted writer, love to talk about it with people.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future post-apocalyptic adventure, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. And I came late to the party. I didn't fall in love with Supernatural until halfway through season 11, at which point I binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months so I could start live tweeting at the beginning of season 12. Kept that up through the rest of the series. Couldn't stand to have the show go on hiatus, so I started reading fan fiction, which is something I used to do a lot of and hadn't for a long time. Fell down the rabbit hole even further. Then went around a corner and found Slash, and read several hundred of those, came up for air, said, wow, this is really good. I wonder what the non-fandom stuff looks like. Read several hundred of the published things and said, this is just too much fun not to be at the party. And my Morgan Bryce, male urban fantasy, paranormal romance pen name was born. And really for all my stuff, even before I started watching the show, they're all worlds Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home, past the salt. So Dean famously refers to Valentine's Day early in the series as Unattached Drifter Christmas, which is his day to get lucky with anybody who hasn't gotten lucky yet. And of course, you know, his looks don't hurt. But the Winchesters have a not too lucky history with love. Let's talk about all those wonderful relationships. Who do you want to start with, Sam or Dean?
Well,
Dean's got more.
now I have to say, I went through Super Wiki and my memory, and I came up with 9 Sam hookups and 5 Dean hookups.
Sam had a surprising amount there.
He did.
A surprising amount. Yes,
And
I concur.
And I also have a list of near misses, I'm calling them. So we can talk about those later. So I don't know. I think we should start with Dean though, because that's his, you know.
Well, it's his reputation.
And of course, you know, the other thing is most of Dean's hookups live to tell the tale. There is what's known in Supernatural fandom. I'll just get it out there because we need to. Sam's Dick of Death.
Yes.
Yep.
Has its own page on Super Wiki.
It does. Because hooking up with Sam Winchester might be the last thing you ever do.
But you go out with a smile on your face.
They even joke about it in the show.
Yeah.
Really has bad luck that way. But yeah, let's start with Dean. And, I'm just going to have a free for all here as long as nobody's stepping on anybody else. Just jump in and pick up. So, Anne, start us off with Dean.
Well, of course, the big one, I know we're not going to get into Cassie, but there's also Lisa. And that was
not Cassie. It was some of the other things. We're not going to, for peace of mind's sake, we're not going to deal with the end of season 15. We're just going to let everybody have their own beliefs about everything there. But Cassie, yeah, the very first, I think he might have actually been in love with her.
Yeah, he told her. He broke the Winchester Code of Silence.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't the best episode with the racist truck, but Cassie was cool.
Yeah, I thought she was cool and had a lot of spirit. And to me, that sort of sets it up that most of the ones that we really see of Dean's hookups are with strong women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting, since you would think he would be a little bit more on the attracted to not so strong women, but both of them are really. And I guess that Dean and Lisa, I know that's controversial, but Dean and Lisa were really my favorite of his hookups. I know a lot of people don't like her, but again, she was a strong woman. And the whole conversation about Ben is a whole nother conversation that I know we don't need to get into, but
everybody has their own headcanon on that one.
Exactly. And then there's the Demon Dean hookup with the waitress when he and Crowley are having their John and Yoko lost weekend. And
subsequent lovers tiff.
Yeah. And, he goes out of his way to defend her, even as a demon, which I thought was really an interesting thing and said something about Dean's personality, even as a demon.
Mm-hmm. Well, and don't forget Anna, because at the same time, when Supernatural loves its mirror images, and so Sam was off with Ruby, and Dean was doing the deed in the back of the Impala with an angel.
Yeah.
And there's that meme about when you realize everybody in your family has had sex in the backseat of your car.
Priceless.
If we switch to Sam really quick, I mean, that's one of my favorite hookups is Sam and Piper in the back of Baby Baby is one of my favorite episodes anyway. And then when they do the whole night moves thing, that's just hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
So while we're talking about Dean, what stands out to everybody else with Dean's romances and hookups?
Something I think is really interesting is that for, the character that coined the phrase Unattached Drifter Christmas, most of his hookups had a lot of feelings behind them. Whereas Sam had more of the traditional hookups, even though you would think that he's the more, emotionally attached, is going to get to, know someone. So it's kind of this like dichotomy there between the two of them.
Someone's also pointed out that if you watch, the love scenes, Dean is actually a lot more gentle in bed. Sam tends to be a little more on the rough and ready side.
Fair.
Which is, again, an interesting insight. Carole, how about you when it comes to Dean?
I concur that I think Dean has the reputation as the ladies' man. He has the bluster. He has the swagger. He's got the jacket. I mean, people fall at his feet. He's gorgeous. But when we see him with anybody, we do see him being very gentle, very caring. He wants to make sure his partner is taken care of. He's not, for all of his bluster, he is not wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. He's much more involved than that. And we're talking even with Susie Lee, the former porn star of Casa Erotica, and he tempts her back to the dark side. But they're passionate, but he's not pushing her into anything. And with Anna, he's so tender with Anna. He shows her passion, but he does it in a very, very sweet way, you know. So I think really the most wham bam thank you man we see him with is Lydia, and that's because Lydia is driving.
And
That's
she's
the
Amazon.
only time, the Amazon, right, Slice Girls, that's the only time we see Dean not be in control. Man, she knows what she wants and she goes after it. And he's like, okay, I'm along for the ride. And that's that. So, and I also just have to mention that when he talks about the Drifter Christmas and Sam is like, release the Kraken. That just always cracked me up. So,
You know,
but yeah, he's got a really gentle side that, you know, just like when we see him with kids or something, that he's not hard like that.
I loved the whole Cassie arc in Route 660 because that was an unexpected insight into Dean and a vulnerability while Sam was gone. He was alone with his dad, but alone.
He was alone.
Yeah.
He was alone, yeah. And how vulnerable he was and trusting to tell her the family secret, and then how much it obviously hurt him that she didn't believe him, because she was a journalist, activist, you know, somebody he might have thought would have really believed this stuff. And she does later, but that ship has sort of sailed. But I liked her because she had a lot of fire. She was brave. She just didn't believe in the supernatural.
Yeah, you would.
Alex, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've thrown out a lot of names there. Does that spark any other thoughts while we're talking about Dean? And we can always come back to it. But
It really sparked something with me. Sorry, Alex, before I forget it again. With remembering young Dean in Bad Boys and the girl that he was going to take to the dance and all that. And of course, he chooses Sam, but it was, you know, he was being very sweet with her and very, you know, and I think that we see that in the grown-up Dean. I mean, that young guy that played young Dean and several times, including in Bad Boys, he had Dean down so well. It was amazing.
And can I just say, I think that's a really interesting point in that we see, of course, Dean in that episode choose Sam and have to not take his girl to the dance and all of that. And that's it. The die is cast. I don't think he ever looks back. You know, he has that brief moment with Cassie because he already thinks Sam is long gone and not coming back. But he never, after that, even remotely thinks, I think, about having an actual relationship. He knows it's love him and leave him because he's on the road and he can't invest.
well, I think he might have fantasized about Lisa. We're given that idea that he does.
But I think a little under duress. He would not, I think he wouldn't necessarily have picked it on his own. He picked it because Sam was going to be gone and Sam steered him that way and said, go have a life, you know.
Well, it was his dying wish and hard.
So I think he did give it a shot and everything, but it was not of his own instinctive choice.
And then as soon as Sam is back again, he's gone. And Lisa had figured out as soon as she saw Sam.
Yep. As soon as he walked in the door, I knew it was over.
Something else that's really interesting is that two things is one, that between the two of them, I think Dean wants a relationship more than Sam does. And I think that some of that comes from the fact that Dean had a relationship with their mother as a child, whereas Sam didn't. Sam grew up on the road the entire time. But at the same time, it's interesting that Dean doesn't really choose the relationship because he has always had to take care of Sam. So when Sam comes back, he goes right back to it. But conversely, you have Sam who didn't go look for Dean when he was in purgatory and chose to kind of settle down. And so you have like the opposite spectrum where, you know, Sam's drive isn't always to protect Dean. That's not in the same way that Dean's drive is to protect Sam. And so I think Sam is more open, but less wanting a relationship, whereas Dean is less open to a relationship, but wants one more.
Interesting point. I mean, some of us absolutely hate the whole "didn't look for you in purgatory," and there have been volumes of fan fiction written about why that is. My headcanon is, I thought you were in heaven and I wasn't going to pull you back, which is probably the simplest. I think the writers did it so that Sam would have the motivation to burn down the world to get Dean back and redeem himself with the mark of Cain and being a demon, because he's willing to do anything. But that's headcanon.
And I think, just as a real quick side thing, you also then get into once again, the parallels. Like we had the parallel of Anna and Ruby, right? We had the parallel of Dean and Benny and Sam and Amelia, and anyway. Yeah. I feel like Amelia was more a port and a storm rather than a true. They were both wrecked, and they both were clinging to anything to keep them above the waters. Right. Rather than, I love you so deeply, never leave my life.
Well, and Sam ends up being more loyal to Dean than Amelia is to Dawn, because Amelia,
absolutely.
Dawn comes back from being MIA in a war, and she's still willing to kick him to the curb for Sam.
Well, look at what she had.
Okay.
Fair.
I mean, come on.
But in terms
I'm sorry, I was kidding.
Not really admirable. So yeah, that's an interesting point. And somebody else had brought up, of course, Annie Hawkins, who got around and was with both boys and Bobby.
And Bobby. Who knows? Maybe she got John in there somewhere.
We'll
never know.
all that, foxholes last night. Plenty of foxholes. Which, if you think about the life that hunters lead, not that surprising. You take, it's almost kind
you can.
of region, you take what life you can get while you can get it, because more so than normal, tomorrow's not guaranteed.
And that plays back into Dean being the ladies' man, because Dean has learned you have a break between hunts, you got a couple of days, you booze it up and find a cute chick and enjoy the moment and move on, because you know what, the next day you could fight a werewolf and lose your heart. Literally. So
this is so, and we can always come back if we remember somebody, but let's talk about Sam, because he's had some notable unlucky hookups, speaking of werewolves. But of course it starts with pure innocent little blonde Jess, who he lies to, who ends up dying in classic Winchester female fashion, although she did get a better nightgown.
One of my friends recently referred to it as fricasseed.
Not wrong. And in fact, they burned a barn on Walker, and I swear I was just like, okay, we've been here before. Who's on the ceiling? Look up, look up. So Jess, she always seemed like an unlikely match to me. We never saw enough of her to really know much about whether she was a strong person or not. She was supportive of him.
She certainly had to be intelligent, because Sam's not going to be with somebody. He's too smart. He's not going to be with somebody who's not his match intellectually.
Well, and she was at Stanford, so
right. And then the other thing is the parallels that are between her and Dean. Physical parallels. Tall, blonde, green eyes, same birthday, all of that kind of thing, that kind of made it like an easier transition. He was, Dean adjacent, that he could have a love interest and yet still kind of fulfill that deep need he needed to be, with the man who essentially raised him. I don't know, thoughts?
That gets brought up a lot, and there's that very telling comment in the pilot when he kisses her and they're having just that loving moment in the bar, and he says, "What would I do without you?" And she says, "Crash and burn." And all of us are going, "Ah!" Of course he does. Shouldn't have made that noise. One of those that you don't catch when you watch it the first time, and then when you rewatch, it's like, oh gosh.
Honestly, I always kind of saw Jess as kind of like the, part of the quintessential college life that he was trying so hard to have, and that normal life that he has. You go to school, you meet somebody, you move in together, but at the same time, yeah, she's someone Sam needs to be taken care of. He doesn't do all that well on his own. He needs a caretaker, and so that's what he found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's really true. He doesn't do well on his own, unless maybe when he's soulless. but he really, I think you make a great point about it being the quintessential college romance kind of thing. And and I was always kind of sorry we didn't get to know her a little better. But again, the way they did the pilot and then subsequent little things we got about her didn't complicate things as much, and it kept the focus on the brothers. And that's important. But yeah, but yet, she seems to be also kind of the woman that any other woman that he gets involved with is measured against, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, not only
she set a bar. She set a bar that anybody else had to meet.
Right. I mean, not just Dean, it's Jessica too.
Which is something that I always kind of didn't like. And honestly, I always thought that she was one of like the most unremarkable of all of the women that he was with, in that we knew so much less about her because of that. And she was probably one of the weakest parts of that pilot, because she was only there. She wasn't there enough for us to know her. And we only cared about her because we cared about Sam. We didn't care about her as a character.
Right. But she represents an ideal. Sam, having grown up in the ratty hotel rooms and the back of the Impala, any image he has of his mother is idealized because he never knew her. And so now Jess becomes that idealized image of, this is what I think should be, and this is the kind of woman I want to be with and have a family and stuff. And therefore, once that's ripped away, that's where then you get, like Anne was saying about that bar is set, in terms of he has this ideal, and as time goes on, he realizes it's an ideal and he moves past it. But in the very beginning, certainly he's really wrestling not just with grief, I think, but with, how does he ever, get that back again?
Well, and if you think about the difference between being 22 and being 37.
Oh yeah.
If you're lucky, you find a person to grow with through that time period. But in general, the kind of person you probably picked at 19, 20 is not maybe necessarily the kind of person, if you weren't in an established relationship to grow together, that would catch your eye when you're 37. So had that continuity with someone, except Dean, and they do grow in their own relationship, but he's never had that with a romantic partner.
Right.
So then there's Madison, and she's tragic. Kind of brave, sort of, about the whole werewolf thing. puts him in a terrible position, which I'm kind of conflicted about. Hi, I just met you and we had sex and you're really attracted to me, so I'm going to ask you to kill me.
Yeah.
You
Makes me
know,
cry every time.
I get it, but I don't get it. You know, it made for good TV, I guess. And then there's Dean offering to do it and Sam feeling he has to. And that was just, you know, awful.
Twisting that knife a little bit.
And of course, there was Sarah, the painting lady in Providence.
She was
I just loved her. I just loved her.
Yeah.
I could really have seen her, you know, she just rolled with it. She had that initial shock, but then it happened in front of her and she rolled with it. And I could really have seen her coming back in a future episode, and not like where she got offed, which was a whole nother thing I was not happy about. But she was somebody who really accepted the fact that this is what was going on and was intelligent and you know, clever and everything. And you know,
Am I remembering correctly that she is the one that completely blew off Dean? Am I remembering that correctly?
He might have. I mean, he might have.
she made it very clear that Sam was the one she was interested in. I think Dean made that initial hey, and she was like, no. You know, but then after that, Dean was like, okay, you know, go for it.
Well, there are a couple of those times when the female Dean was making the initial, and the woman clearly focused on Sam. The lady they were trying to do that deal to get, wasn't a hand of God, I can't remember, but she was the dealer. And
yeah, she was a cougar.
yeah, she was definitely a cougar. And they're sitting at a table, and she just sort of gives Dean the and focuses totally on Sam.
There's also the women, the two cougars in the Asking Jeeves, you know, and they're both like all over him and like, oh, look at his fingers.
And look on his face.
Yeah.
Through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was so funny. And he gets so flustered.
Well, speaking of cougars, there's also in Swap Meet the one that
the dominatrix.
Yeah. I wrote that one down.
Takes Sam for a joyride.
That was hilarious.
Crystal.
Okay.
Crystal the dominatrix. I'm sorry, that one killed me. It's so funny.
Yeah. That whole episode.
We shall have the sex.
Well, and then of course there's the Kitsune.
Yeah. Although they only ever like kissed. They were like that teen romance briefly, you know, where it was just
like the girl that Dean had a crush on when he was at the
you know, it was just that very innocent kind of a kiss, and it was a big deal. And you know, because I think when they re-met as adults, you know, he had fond memories of her, but he clearly had no interest in, you know, rekindling anything with her. It was just like, oh, here's this fond memory I have, you know.
Amy Pond.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and there was the doctor that the psychologist, I think, in
no, she was like an endocrinologist or something, Dr. Kara.
With Siren.
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot about her too.
Oh, that was a hot one too. She was all like, you know, up in his face, like murmuring and stuff. And
and then of course there's Ruby.
Yeah.
That one worked out well.
But Ruby, once again, we're talking about so much manipulation in there. You know, she really took. Had he been left to his own devices, would he have had a relationship with Ruby? Here we're talking about somebody who took his obvious grief, his obvious loneliness, had her own agenda that we didn't even remotely know at that point. You know, that didn't come till later. We thought, oh, she's a renegade demon. No. So here she is manipulating him for her own agenda beyond an agenda, and
getting him hooked on an
getting him
addictive
hooked on the demon blood and all of that. And that's not really, those were not his true feelings, you know. And I know we're not getting into the Eileen thing, but there's a touch of that too, because of the whole Chuck thing behind it, where what's real and what's not, because there was so much else going on, as opposed to Piper, Dr. Kara, Sarah, you know, those people who were just out and out true encounters, you know, people meeting people.
Yeah, someone did ask Jared, you know, have your kids asked you yet, you know, where they came from? And he said, I'm just going to tell them season 4. I don't know if they were together yet when they shot that scene, but it's definitely a good one.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about the chemistry that they had, and it was just like, well, yeah, they bet they had a lot of chemistry.
So much more than you know, the first Ruby, blonde Ruby.
Well, I think in the blonde Ruby, we didn't have any intimations of what was to come. She was really just working with them. There wasn't anything about, let me try to entice them, or you know what I mean? It was clearly a whole shift. As we shifted rubies, we shifted those agendas, you know, where Katie Cassidy Ruby was, I just want to do these things, and Genevieve Ruby was, I want to coerce him into my power so that I can play this long con. You know, you have a really different feel to that.
But actually, the Katie Cassidy Ruby had sort of set it up for the long con.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and
so who knows what would have happened if they had continued with her?
Yeah,
this may still have all transpired, but they changed actresses, and so, you know.
Well, I think that Alex, right? Yeah, she got the job on Arrow, and they had to change actresses. But I think that he would not have had the same chemistry with Katie Cassidy that he had with.
Oh, sure.
I mean, just totally.
Right. Yeah. Well, they lucked out on that. Sometimes you just don't know, until you have everybody in play, and then you're like, how does this work out? Oh, look at that.
Well, Jensen has said that one of his favorite memories on set is watching Jared, you know, fall in love with Jen and follow her around like a smitten puppy. And Jared, in his self-defense, said, well, she showed up for the first day of work in her underwear, and I was a single guy.
That's fair.
Which, you know, seems logical to me. But yes, there's definite chemistry there. At whatever point they got involved with each other, it certainly worked on screen, and made for good TV.
I do say you can't overlook, with, you know, the chemistry was great, but you can't overlook that at its core, that was a very abusive relationship. It's
very, very
basically
much so,
the relationship between an addict and their dealer. And that's just gotten romantically involved. And, you know, I know a lot of people that have, you know, struggled with addiction and that kind of thing, that really identified with that, and how hard it is to break away, especially when you've gotten into a relationship with that person.
And then add to that the fact that he genuinely thought, I'm doing a good thing. I'm saving people. I'm not killing them to pull the demon out. I can stop this. I can thwart this evil plan. I mean, Sam has nothing but the best intentions here. They just get played against him.
Well, and we find out when she tells him that he never needed the feather to fly, that he could have pulled those demons out of people and saved those lives without becoming an addict. And that's always, you know, been one of those things where you keep saying, okay, I understand what Kripke was doing for the arc and where he was going with it. but how different things might have been if Dean could have accepted that part of Sam as not being intrinsically evil. It wouldn't have pushed him into Ruby's arms.
Right.
If Dean had said, okay, this is weird, not what we were brought up for, but you're my brother and I'm backing you. Let's do this. The show wouldn't have gone.
I think what's so difficult for Dean at that point, though, is he is freshly back from hell. So he's coming from this whole different perspective of there's no way a demon can be good. I've been there and I've done that and it can't happen, and then of course you kick in all his protectiveness of who is, like Alex said, who is abusing my brother, who is, taking advantage of him and feeding him this line that from where I just saw 40 years in hell, no way in hell is that happening.
Well, and the other thing that gets obliquely hinted at, sometimes more so, sometimes less, is that both of them, it stands to reason, were sexually abused in hell. We get that kind of from Alistair's comments. We certainly get that from Lucifer's bunk buddy comments.
Oh, yeah.
And so
it's very clear.
If you put that in addition to just having been tortured and Alistair and all that in hell, and then coming back and finding your little brother with a demon and your Dean, and
words are going to work.
It's very understandable.
And so now, interesting to segue from here is then let's, what about Soulless Sam, whose soul is back in hell, right? And here he is now walking the earth and he has no compunctions. He's, Sam is always like, I'm not going to, of course, take advantage of anybody. Dean is like, I'm not going to take advantage of anybody, but I'm going to take anything that's offered to me. And Soulless Sam is beyond that, going, I want it, I take it. Isn't it the Ariana Grande song? I want it, I'll have it,
Who was Saffron or something? The one while Dean is being bonded with
Patchouli Girl.
Yeah, Patchouli Girl. That's what I remember. It's Patchouli Girl.
Here you are banging patchouli.
Yeah. And that does all.
Is that bad?
Give us,
that bad.
When you have been, how do they keep phrasing it? Requested to service Oberon, and he keeps saying shut up. But that's left a little ambiguous.
Yeah. But they're always talking about the aliens probing. Way back on Tall Tales, but then again here too with patchouli.
Yeah,
the probing. He had
girl,
the famous Lana the hooker, who's like, call me on my night off. The famous wonderful intro scene where Soulless Sam is working out shirtless and the fandom, fainted.
Chin ups.
Anyway, but she's like, oh, call me. And so he had Annie, he's got Sparrow, he's got Lana, and much like Dean has many, many women that we never hear specifics about, we just always know that he has this score of women he's been with, right? And that's how Soulless Sam is now too. We don't even
and we know Dean scored with twins at least twice.
Yeah.
Closing those curtains and then
that's a great iconic scene.
And those twins. And Sam, I don't think I want to know.
Yeah, and then there's the crazy waitress in Tampa. Was it the crazy waitress where? Tampa that he?
Yeah, the one in Tampa that's always brought up the quintessential mistake.
Oh, yeah. The one. So Soulless Sam cut quite the swath apparently through, the female half of the population. Oh, the woman in, I don't remember the name of the episode, but the Arachne.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean's like, don't go back anywhere you've been, because he doesn't want Sam to remember. And Sam's like, we've got to fix this. I did something, I have to fix it. And he has that flashback of that woman and he's rushing into the bathroom with her. That was clearly quite the hot little you know, spontaneous moment.
Mm-hmm. And then coming back to Amelia, because we just kind of have to.
Do we though?
Do we? When you've seen the chemistry with Ruby and then the not chemistry with Amelia, I think that was one of the biggest reasons I didn't buy into it, even though I hated the whole thing about I didn't look for you. And Jared has said he never really liked that piece of it either. But also, dude, other than being willing, there was just
nothing to
no
work with.
chemistry.
Mm-mm.
It was really a double-edged sword because, yes, on the one hand, we're still struggling with the fact that would Sam really have not looked for him? Putting that aside, because that's a whole other issue. Yeah, there's the fact that this woman was nasty to him. He brings in this dog that he accidentally hit. He didn't mean to hit the dog. And she's like yelling at him, well, take care of the dog. Oh, she just.
And forcing a guy who's homeless and doesn't have any money and guilting him into taking care of an injured dog.
Yeah. And then she's living at the same ratty motel he is, and yet she's ragging on him for his, Goodwill Army surplus clothing. And yet she's the one who drinks so much that her disposal is so clogged with lines. He has to fix it. So she's not in any better situation. And yet she's consistently so superior to him that you're like, did he feel he needed to be abused? Did he feel he needed to be ragged on because he didn't look for Dean? I mean, did he feel he deserved this? Because what was in it for him?
I mean, with relationships like that, when you're brought together because what brought them together ultimately was the fact that he had just lost his brother and she had thought she had lost her husband. And so you see relationships, in television like that and in real life, generally that's not going to go well. Like another one that I can think of, outside of Supernatural is, I don't know if any of you guys have seen Titans, but the Hawk and Dove relationship is really similar when they're brought together by loss like that rather than other factors. A lot of times it's not the best relationship and it can be really abusive, and especially when there's a lot of guilt there because this is a relationship she's getting into with this guy and she feels guilty about it because of her husband and everything, and then which really makes you wonder why at the end when her husband shows back up she's like ready to leave him, and it's like, this is the thing you've been guilty about the whole time.
Well, then we get back to the look at what she's got.
Well, too, getting back to the whole chemistry thing, it struck me that this storyline looked good on paper, but he did not, or the two actors didn't have the kind of chemistry that could have really brought that to life.
There's also
I agree.
Yeah, there's also the theory that since the early images of him and Amelia are very soft focus and kind of golden, and then there is a theory that it was all a hallucination while he was missing Dean so badly, and that at some point there was a shift in thinking in the writers to make it real.
Right, and like with that whole picnic scene where he's walking through the meadow and there she is with the picnic and the cake and everything, and yeah, that was very much like, is this real? Is this not real? But
which parallels Dean's, image with Lisa at the picnic. What is it with picnic?
It's such an innocent. It portrays innocence, and
I mean, does anybody actually go on picnics and have birthday cakes? Maybe.
I don't. Too many ants.
But I like that one better than I like it played out, and I think that is just canon and not ever substantiated. But to me, that would have made a lot more sense.
At that point, Dean had more chemistry with Benny than Sam did with Amelia. So at that point, as we're running those parallels a la Ruby and Anna, Dean had the better end of the stick. He at least had somebody who related to him and they got along, and
Oh yeah.
they at least had enough chemistry that it spawned a whole new line of fanfic. Because there was something to work with there. There's nothing to work with Sam and Amelia.
Which honestly makes sense that it should be that way. Because honestly, when I see it, Sam and Amelia shouldn't have good chemistry. It shouldn't be there. It's supposed to be a broken relationship and one that's toxic for the two of them. Whereas they were brought together by mutual loss, mutual
right.
that there. Benny and Dean were brought together by mutual need. They both needed someone to watch their back. It makes sense that their relationship is closer.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
No, that does make a lot of sense. So, and as we said, just for the sake of keeping the peace, we're not going to go to the last half of season 15. So, skipping back to Mama and Daddy Winchester, they had their share of extracurricular activities as well. Let's start with Papa Winchester. As far as we know, he didn't hook up with Annie Hawkins, but he's kind of her type.
And let's face it, he was a big, handsome man.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he was constantly in mourning for his wife, but it doesn't mean he didn't find a moment of solace here and there,
And
even somebody in that kind of constant grief doesn't have those moments where you're like, I have to, remember I'm a human kind of thing. So,
and not to mention the appeal of the brooding, wounded, good-looking that everybody wants to save. Not healthy, but certainly human.
So no wonder the nurse fell for him. No wonder the nurse fell for him.
Yeah.
So,
Kate, yeah.
Kate. And we're not completely sure about Annie Hawkins, but it's like Asa Fox. We don't know how many of the female hunters he hooked up with, besides Jody.
Yeah. Well, and I can definitely see that. I felt so bad for Sam and Dean finding out that he gave Adam a normal childhood, but you can certainly see where if a kindly nurse had patched him up and he needed to recuperate for a long time, feelings could happen.
I don't think they even resented the fact that he had a relationship with her so much as he gave to Adam what he never gave to them. I don't think they were kind of like, okay, he had a woman, all right, but it was the fact that Adam had the baseball games and stuff that they didn't. They had, PT drills at 5 a.m. and stuff.
Well, it's not cheated on Mary. Mary was long dead.
And right. So that's what I mean. They didn't care that he was with a woman. They cared, especially Dean. I mean, Sam kind of rolled with it, but Dean's thing was like, our lives were hell growing up, and this kid got to go to school and, go to baseball games, and John gave him all this attention that they never
But in
had.
John's defense, the nurse, he was, Adam was 12 before he ever met John. And
I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And so do we know, and we don't know if John ever knew about Adam until Adam was 12 or whatever. And and it's only after that he said, I think Adam said he saw John once a year, maybe twice a year on his birthday or something.
Yeah.
Well, and if Kate and John really weren't trying to be a couple, or that was never intended, and they just kind of had something while he was there and then he was gone, and they had an understanding, and then she finds out she's pregnant, you can kind of understand not chasing down a guy like that.
Right.
He got a baby. Makes perfect sense. You wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You just assume he wouldn't want to be involved, and it would be dangerous.
So I think it's clear pretty much anyone that John was involved with besides that was, ships that passed in the night kind of thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which brings us to Mama Winchester. Okay. Catch and AU Bobby. I mean, she's a grown woman, but Catch at that.
Yeah, I had a
was
hard time with that.
Catch.
I mean, I think he's, he's very dashing and everything, but we're talking about the man who worked for the company that tortured her sons.
Yeah.
That was really hard. I mean, AU Bobby is, if anything, that's a really good fit in terms of he knows the world. He knows the life. He's, they're both older. They've been through the mill. They know that nothing is going to be puppies and roses, but they can be compatriots and give each other comfort and all that kind of stuff.
And they were together in the AU world that was so bad.
Right.
And
Right.
there works that foxhole thing again in a way.
Right. Right.
More extended.
Exactly.
But
Anything on that, Alex? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anne.
No, I was just gonna say I have a weakness for cats, so I'm not. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex, any thoughts?
No, I was just clearing my throat.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, we are actually out of time. So let's go around and give a quick, where can people find you on social media? And thank you so much for being here for Unattached Drifter Christmas. Alex, let's start with you. Where can folks find you online, and what's your next book?
So next book is tentatively titled The Vault and the Vessel. Edits just went back to the editor, so hopefully that'll come out in the next couple of months. We'll see what the timeline looks like on that. You can find me at my website, alexandergideon.net. You can read my blog at readasthouwill.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Alexander Gideon. Facebook, facebook.com/a.g.r.gideon, and on TikTok at Alex Gideon Author.
Cool. Anne?
I'm on Facebook at Ann Wicker, and also we have a little Facebook group, a Facebook business thing called East Oak Media, and you just search those and you can find me. And then I'm on Twitter at Ann Wicker, and I'm also on Instagram Ann.Wicker2.
Okay. Carole?
Gotta keep all these names straight, right? I'm usually online under Firesign10, and on Twitter I'm true_Firesign10, and all my stuff is on AO3 under Firesign10. Heed the tags.
And I'm real easy to find at gailzmartin.com and morganbryce.com. I also run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, and of course the Supernatural track here at ConTinual, and everything else is some version of those names. Folks, thank you so much for being with us and celebrating Valentine's Day in the Winchester way. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more Supernatural here on ConTinual.